First of all, on behalf of the ICAA, we want to thank all of you for joining us. We also want to thank our speakers, all of our speakers who have traveled great distances to be here for this critical and worthy discussion. My name is Eric Ost, Chairman of Urban Design Associates in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, board member and fellow of the ICAA, and chair of the Gindros Award Committee. The Gindros Award is presented annually to a team that has demonstrated excellence in the practice and design of affordable housing. In our winners, you'll see three characteristics: collaborative visions and solutions addressing the critical issues of our time, classical and traditional architecture playing a significant role in its success, and that this is more than just about design. This is about people and human spirit. Our 2023 winner was Union Studio of Providence, Rhode Island. Their work is focused on urban infill, healing the city and its affordability challenges. Don Powers founded Union Studio in 2001 with one overriding goal: to use architecture and urban design to contribute to the civic and social health of communities. He has steered Union Studio into a nationally recognized firm, collaborating with like-minded clients and colleagues across the country.
Hello, everybody. Donald Powers, Union Studio Architecture. I just want to take a minute to sort of say what this award that was given to us in 2023 has meant to us. We as a firm we are a generalist firm. We've been practicing for about 25 years now, and affordable housing with a capital A, affordable housing, has always been a component of our work. And we just assumed this is work we had to do as responsible architects, and nobody was ever going to notice it. And then one day, Eric Ost came and knocked on my door and said, "Hey, listen, we'd really like to recognize you for this award." And I have to say, that is the most meaningful professional award I've had, to have the work that we thought we were sort of toiling away in obscurity be recognized by an organization that I really respect. And so I want to thank you for that. This is our firm, Union Studio. We were founded in 2001. We are currently 40 employees in 2 offices in Providence and Philadelphia. We're a generalist. I think it was Hugh Petter who used the term expert generalist, and that's what we always set out to be. We set out to be expert generalists because ultimately what we were really interested in was the building of communities, and it occurred to us that you cannot be in charge of building a community if you don't know something about every type that has to go into that community. So we chose the most difficult business format you could do, which is to do everything. And that's what we've been doing. And every time someone asks us if we've ever done that, we say no, but we think we can do it. So, but the common denominator is that everything we do is intended to use the power of the design to enrich lives and strengthen communities. So within that context, classicism and tradition have been our animating principle. That's what's been the lens through which we viewed everything we do. We believe much more in the idea of competency and education than we do in creativity and genius. We always say we'll leave the genius to the other guys. We're just going to be good. We're going to learn our job, and we're going to be good and let the geniuses be the geniuses. So this places our professional efforts in a philosophical framework, which is much more than personal expression. And these images on the left, that's University of Virginia, and the famous image of Leon Krier. This gives dignity. It provides a lens and a way to value all the work we do, from the modest to the grand. So when we're doing a hotel on the waterfront, it's one lens, and when we're doing a workers' cottage on a side street, that's another. And they both have the same importance in our practice. And it suggests that everything we do, whether it be a laundry shed in a public affordable housing neighborhood or a whole new neighborhood, has the same dignity and the same seriousness of purpose. So where does affordable architecture with a capital A fit into this? If we've got a spectrum where we're doing precious custom houses on the left and we're renovating workers' cottages on the right, where does that fit in? The first thing I'll say is that affordable housing, for me, I hate that term, because we don't do affordable housing, we do housing. Sometimes it's funded in an affordable way, sometimes it's funded by the market rate and conventional financing. But the other thing I've noticed is that architecture in every context, whether you're doing it for a rich country estate or you're doing a workers' cottage on a side street, it's always under the pressure to deliver that purpose in the least cost available. Maybe your purpose for that building is to impress and with shock and awe, but you're still not going to throw money away. So there's an attitude of economy that imbues everything you do as an architect, and we've never made a separation between one type and another. And classicism contains within itself the recognition of that. You know, this temple right here is the ancestor of this outhouse on the right. They come out of the same lineage, they come out of the same respect for tradition. Even within the sort of formal theorizing about classical architecture there, Robert Adams' book, Classical Architecture, provides just the rationale, or at least explicates the what's inherent in classicism, this idea that what's really important is the proportion, not the detail. So you can sort of have the same order expressed in increasingly simple forms. What's left behind is that hidden order, the proportion there. You can also do it in the opposite direction, where a basic underlying proportion, which is correct, can be embellished, and in the other direction, sort of stripped back to make something much simpler and presumably less expensive. So I'm saying all this just to sort of justify that what we do as architects of affordable housing falls within this mental construct of classicism and tradition. So even at the level of the urban plan, classicism already assumes that there are monuments and there are background buildings. So you've got in fact, it would be a terrible city if it were all monuments. So there is a real urbanistic need for the simple stuff to set the foil to the monuments. So one of the things we've done since we've taken this idea of affordability as a worthy subject of study, and not just some projects that we have to do where we don't have a great budget, is we've looked back at how that's been accomplished. And in America, I would say in America in the early days, it was more a matter of how could you take the inherently affordable architecture and ennoble it with sort of Asher Benjamin's booklet, which was meant to convey the proper technique of building to the builders who were just building these provisional wooden structures in the woods. But we've studied all of the ways that American architects have attempted to deliver affordability, from the kit houses to the more recent modular and panelized stuff. We've built that way, and we've studied it. We've worked with some of the leading panelizers and prefabricated home systems, and here's what I can tell you for a fact. None of them can deliver affordability in the way that we're talking about. They all have their benefits, but there is no system that we've come up with yet that can deliver a market rate affordable housing. So the rules of affordability, as we see them, and I'm looking at our English colleagues and I'm shuddering at this slide because this is sort of peak American, is that this is our palette. This is the palette I work with. And you can say, okay, that's immoral. You shouldn't be working with FIPON polyurethane moldings and cheap knockoff moldings, but that is what we're working with. And there's a kind of inherent structure in the American constructional system that forces you into this palette, because that's the most efficient thing, and that's when you're working at the level that we're working at, this is what you've got. There's also kind of an impressive logic to American construction, which is sort of based on this absolutely militant module of 2 feet, which is based on the formwork for foundations. That's followed by the 16 inches on center, which is how the framing is laid out, the 4x8 sheet of plywood that gets laid on that, and the 8-foot, or actually 93-inch stud, which is the standard stud that you're gonna use. And when you take all those together, when you're building affordably, you simply have to accept that is the system and don't buck it. Don't try to cheat it a little bit. It's 4 corners in a box. So, you know, when you're trying to build a house like this, so one of the things we think of is not so much building absolutely an affordable thing, but how can you build a good thing more affordably? And that means going down the path of least resistance and accepting the realities of the American construction system. And the reality of constructing in America is that the simplest way to build is to build a box, 4 corners, no more than 4 corners, and put a trussed hat on the top. You start with that, and you start with the idea that the trades don't know or care what the next trade coming on is doing. There is nobody in the process of normal production building who's keeping an eye on the end game. So you have to understand that and construct your buildings or design them with that in mind. So if you're going to add embellishments, you're faking them into the roof line. You're adding to this basic box. You're adding an eave, which suggests a dominant roof and a shed dormer. And then you're adding things onto the face of this chassis that has been built as simply and as efficiently as possible. One thing we say is sort of approximating the real detail. If you want to build a bay window, good luck. It's not happening in my world. A bay, this wildly complex thing to build a bay window. But what can you do within the system? You can build that box, and then you can just pack it out with a couple of 2x6s, wrap that in trim, and now you've got something that approximates a bay window and adds a little shadow line to the building and gives it a sense of presence that it wouldn't have, even though you have, not for a minute have you tried to violate the rules of construction in an American system. So this is what that looks like in real life. And the client for this was Steve Maughan, who's sitting in the back there. This is one of the first projects we did together, a wonderful neighborhood called Warwick Grove. But that whole project was disciplined by this idea that don't fight the system, assume the trades are not talking to each other, and create a thing that's sort of, I don't want to be disrespectful to the trades, but it's idiot-proof. I guess that was disrespectful to the trades. Another observation is that the kind of classically correct detail is harder to build. You can get close with something that's not classically correct. So anybody who's done this detail knows that the profile of the rake molding is actually different than the profile at the eave. And if you're going to run that molding down and try to turn the corner at the eave, you've got a very complicated geometric thing. And the evidence of it is all over the Northeast of that bad miter filled with caulk and then painted 3 times. It's always rotting, and eventually it's just covered with vinyl because they don't have anything else to do. But what if you just accepted that you're not doing it correctly, but you're doing it in a way that's achievable, and now you just roll that one at the eave out to the same. So now you can miter it right around the corner. Now this may be too esoteric I don't want to go too deep into this, but it's more a principle of accepting the limitations and then building within them than screaming and being frustrated that the world won't accommodate your vision for architecture. So we've just accepted it. We've worked within that, and we think that getting half a loaf is better than getting no loaves. Or then this was just the last one, which said you can avoid the issue altogether by doing a technically incorrect detail of running the entablature molding past the raking eave and just avoiding that issue altogether. So those are the sort of that's a constructional attitude. But there are other ways to address affordability. And I will say that even from a constructional point of view, none of what I just showed, if you employed all of them, will deliver a house that is affordable by somebody at a certain level. It's just, I've come to this sort of radical conclusion that if we really want to build affordable housing, at the most modest levels, there has to be a subsidy. But there are other ways to think about it. And one of them is that the building itself doesn't need to be affordable. Maybe the building itself can create its own income. And so it'll offset that mortgage. So this is a prototype house we called the side hustle, because the side hustle, as you all know, is sort of a little job you have on the side. And this was just a pre-designed, pre-documented set of drawings that had these modules that were pre-built that could be an accessory dwelling unit that gets tacked on the back that could get you additional rental income, or a little workshop off to the right, and then it could be delivered. And we offered that sort of free on our website to anybody who wanted it. That was one way we were trying to address the idea of affordability. This is a version that was built by this old house for our folks from the UK. This old house is a long-standing public television show that's sort of the original Shelter show. And anyway, they built this as a model. One other way we've approached affordability is the idea of entitlement and how difficult in empowering the small developer. The small developer, the guy who's got a pickup truck and a small construction business, If he wants to build a speculative house in a neighborhood where he's just found a lot, he has the same set of hoops he has to go through as a big developer he's got to get an architect, he's got to go through 6 months of entitlement, he's got to have the site plan approved by the DPW. We've been working with the Cape Cod Commission to create a whole catalog of what they call pre-approved plans. These have been vetted by all the people that need to be vetted. They're simple things. And if the builder agrees to just build it as it's been designed and documented, he can walk into the building official's office, walk out with a free set of plans and an approval to go begin building that day. And this sounds easy and obvious. This has been years of working with the Cape Cod Commission to get all of the towns to accept this crazy idea that one of these little houses does not need to be a hand-wringing effort that takes 6 years of approvals to get it done. So this is another way to approach the idea of affordable housing. But really, and this is the point of my talk, the only real rheostat or lever we have to pull on the idea of affordability is density. We've been delivering this model, and we've been encouraging and promoting this model of the American dream, which is the young couple and the big single-family house. That will never accommodate the kind of housing shortage that we've got and never be the affordability problem that we've got. Not least of which because the cost of development for that single-family house, or the soft costs, the pre-development costs, are the same for one house as it is for 20 houses. And so there's a point in the curve where the number of units and the cost of development cross, and now every new unit you add to the project is essentially coming for free, at least in terms of the development project. So that's why we get to the idea that density is the lever that you need to pull. You need more units per acre to adjust the affordability in any way. And as people have noted, not all densities are it's not just density. Pruitt-Igoe was very dense, and it was torn down, I think, 15 years after it was built. So that's not the solution, just density in and of itself. The way you achieve density is traditional urbanism, and that sort of brings us back full circle to the ICAA and the idea of classicism, is that traditional urbanism provides the way to mediate, to create the density, and then to make living in that density not just tolerable, but actually delightful. New York City is an example. So we've done a deep dive with Dan Perlak from Opticos coined the term missing middle years ago about, but he made the simple observation that where are all these other housing types that we had in our towns for years up until about 1940? And those were all the bungalow courts and the duplexes and the townhomes and the 6-unit walk-ups that have been zoned out of existence in America. So we made a real practice out of deploying those, bringing those back as a way to get the density up in a way that's acceptable to communities. And it's just an example of what I mean when I say that not all densities are equal is this project in what used to be my hometown we did. And the upper right, you see right there, these are two, I'm sorry for the blurry slide, but this lot was zoned for what they called high density residential, which is 20 units per acre. And the town went up in arms because they rightfully expected that whatever's going to be put there was going to look like the thing on the left. That's what high density residential is. And you can see just to the right of this is a single family neighborhood. And so they were fearing that. And we came in and we said, we can take that, we can deconstruct that multifamily building into this bungalow court, sort of cottage court. And the point I want to make is that rendering of urbanism deflated all the opposition. So this is what was delivered to the neighborhood, and now they have something they can go kick. When you say 20 units to the acre, you say, what do you mean 20 units to the acre? 20 units to the acre could be anything, and it could be this. And so, I like to point out that this was came out of the ground in 2009 or 10. There were 15 building permits pulled in that town in 2010. All 15 of them were here, and it was sold within 6 months at the absolute nadir of the housing market. So we've been working closely with many of the communities on the Cape to do individual studies on specific lots or areas of their towns to visualize density and to say, to get them over the hump, to accept the fact that they want to solve their housing problem, they need to do it through urbanism and good density. One example I want to show of what that can do, we inherited this project, which was this affordable housing project in Barrington, Rhode Island. The site plan, it was rightfully rejected by the town. We were hired to come in and reimagine it, and we were forced, because of the way it was rejected by the Superior Court, to design a statistically identical project. Same amount of lot coverage, same amount of road coverage, same amount of open space, but we re-rendered it in a way that delivered actual public space and actual frontage, and it was approved. The town, which had spent 7 years fighting the development, approved this in about 3 months. So that's the power of good urbanism in my mind is not so much, one of them is the entitlement and making it happen. So this is what that looks like in its final form. And so I just want to end with just a couple of slides of some of those urbanist principles that I think delivers good density. The idea that you need to be very aware of and try very hard to reflect the local context. You need to include the features that foster community, like sidewalks and porches and all of those things. Compensate for the loss of privacy that you get when you bring people closer together with greater social connection. One of the things we found in this neighborhood right here was that 70% of the buyers were single women. They perceived immediately the form of this was going to create more of a neighborhood than some of the other, and they all wanted to be there. So that was a very interesting sociological surprise. The urbanism is appropriate to its context. Not everything wants to be downtown or should be downtown. This was in a very rural part of the state, and it was conceived of as a more rural language of architecture and a more informal set of connections. And to create a sense of ownership and address. That's so important for people, especially people who are marginalized, to feel like they are part of the community. And one of the best ways you can do that is give them a door that opens right into the public realm and says, this is my home, come to my address. And then finally, just that the design has to be dignified. You should never experiment at this level. I find it infuriating. I always tell the story about Brad Pitt after Katrina, hiring all these architects to go down there and play God with the people that are least able to tolerate that. And so our idea is just do no harm. And the last one is mixed use and tenure, just the idea that it's not all one type of ownership. This is mixed use, it's rental, it's condo, and all of those together make up a community. So thank you very much.